A very high risk, but I have very good controls becomes a lower risk. I'm in healthcare. I'm going to triage the highest ones first. And so that quantitative analysis allows us to kind of look at it in a different way. Now, that's actionable intelligence so that I can make operational decisions.
Welcome to the Risk Never Sleeps podcast, in which we learn about the people that are on the front lines delivering and protecting patient care. I'm Ed Gaudet, the host of our program, and today I am pleased to be joined by Tim Swope, the Interim CISO at the University of Chicago. Did I get that right?
You've got it correct.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Awesome. And welcome. This is the 100th episode of the Risk Never Sleeps podcast. You are the 100th participant.
It looks like I might win a prize for that. So.
I think someone knocks on your door and gives you a cake or something. I'm hoping anyway. They show up soon. I'm just kidding. All right. So let's start off with Tim. Tell our listeners about your current role in your organization.
Yeah, the current role I have is now as an interim CISO. So what that is often I go into an organization when they either a CISO has left, there's been some issues that they need to have remediated. A lot of them center around risk. So I go in and I assess the risk, their cyber posture, and put together plans, corrective action plans, and sometimes training. I look at people, process, and the tools they have in order to make sure that when I leave, and my goal is that I do have to leave. I usually stay for anywhere from 5 to 6 months. And when the next CISO comes in, and usually I work with them for a month or two for transition, but then they have a clean slate. So, I walk in and the flag is hanging upside down. And when they leave, the fort is corrected. So that's a little what I do for a living.
Excellent. So that must give you the opportunity to see a lot of things.
It does. And, I also take a real objective eye. You know what I mean? Because objectivity means you based on evidence. But one of the things I've told people is, and everybody listening to the podcast might not be as old as I am, but our parents told us not to look at the TV because all you saw was dots. The thing is, when you stand back, what do you see? The whole picture. So that's kind of what I do. I'm standing back from the organization. It allows me a little bit of ability to see the picture that others don't.
That's great. So tell our listeners how you got into healthcare and how you got into IT.
Well, one of the things is I actually have a degree in economics and math. And right now, I probably couldn't get a job at Starbucks with that. So the way, and I studied Fortran in college at Indiana University. So the thing is, things have changed immensely over the years. I've actually have 28 years in life sciences. I started off as a data scientist. I worked with companies like Thomson Reuters Health, which is now Truven, Reed Elsevier. And I did a lot of business intelligence work for pharmaceutical companies, especially in the 90s and the 2000s. One thing that was interesting that happened from a pharmaceutical standpoint, of course, they had like GXP requirements, almost like, and they were very heavy regulated, just like health, hospitals and such. And I'm going to date myself again. They called it information assurance, right? And so they didn't have the term cybersecurity. None of us did at that time. As things were moving ahead, and you looked at from a data science standpoint, now they do it for patient analytics. You had different levels of aggregation. Those became security levels for what details you could see on you would say now in I say now in healthcare patient, but back then they were doing clinical trials, so they are under the same requirement. So I leveraged that to assist healthcare organizations from a cyber standpoint. I got started with many. I've worked with over 5 large health systems, New York City Health and Hospitals, Northwell, Catholic Health, Stony Brook, to name a few. And there was a program about, I think it was probably around 2014. It was called District Delivery System Reinvestment Incentive Program, federally funded program, to see how hospitals could work together for a Medicaid population, reduce emergency room visits. What that required was that you had a standard cybersecurity requirement from the Department of Health. And that was my entree into really working from this capacity with health systems.
Wow. Excellent. And so you mentioned data science early on in your career. A lot's changed in that area. How are you thinking about, and how are you helping University of Chicago and others as they think about introducing artificial intelligence, Gen AI, and other capabilities in their organization?
Our organization is very interesting too, because you have University of Health. You also have Texas University of Health, Harvard University. So one thing is we're all connected with the university, and the university loves AI. Plus, they don't have as many requirements we do. Healthcare, we're very, we have risks around using generative AI and learning models that are outside the organization, because then you have patient health issues and issues. One of the things I do say is we will adopt it sooner or later. In fact, IBM they've used AI. We call it assisted intelligence. When you look at cancer cells, they'll take a picture of it. They got 476 million plus pictures of it, and they're able to see if you need a second opinion. So we've been doing assisted. They've augmented intelligence. One of the things that, I'll be honest, which I use from a cyber standpoint and risk standpoint, is actionable intelligence. So when everybody's looking at the greatest tools, the tools actually give us this information. And that information will say, and as we're talking about risk, this might be a risky endeavor. And sometimes we use quantitative analysis. So everybody does one of these. That's a 1, maybe that's a 2. And everybody understands the whole thing, the likelihood, the impact of the organization.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have something behind those. That's the first thing. The other thing too is, how do they factor over your control effectiveness? In other words, a very high risk, but I have very good controls, becomes a lower risk. I'm in healthcare. I'm going to triage the highest ones first. And so that quantitative analysis allows us to kind of look at it in a different way. Now, that's actionable intelligence, so that I can make operational decisions.
I love that. You can manage the residual risk in a way that allows you to focus on those things that matter, that might be more risky, that you haven't been looking at.
And we really never read it. It's incumbent upon the work that we do. We have risk everywhere in healthcare. So, in fact, I try to break it down to things. We have enterprise risk, large organizational risk. We have some ad hoc risks, and these come up all the time. People sending patient information potentially through their Hotmail, or they could put a thumb drive. You don't block the use. Those would be ad hoc risks, and then you have vendor risks. All those three, when you look at a Venn diagram of them, they center upon a risk posture. However, you could pull them apart and analyze them separately, and that shows where your real risks are coming from an organization. So again, those are actionable intelligence. I always hate to, pivot from the AI. I'll be honest, in my world right now, Skynet is not fully aware, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're getting there. We're going to learn how to use it, but again, it will most likely be, from a standpoint, we have more alerts that are coming in every day.
Mm-hmm.
So you use tools that give you certain types of event alerts. Correlating those alerts is a very tedious business, and that's where that AI will come in. Is it going to, there's some decisions we actually have to make ourselves. A lot of people can say, I can identify anomalous behavior in months in your organization. You've never worked in our hospitals. Not only that, they're all different from the area. So you really have to have that human intervention, and then the AI really is augmented intelligence to us right now.
I love that. And you got to be able to connect with the business to communicate the differences and help them make the decision about taking on risk.
There's some risk.
Technology.
Yep. We just have a new CIO. I've worked with our older CIO at a couple different places, and he understands my way of working. But, if I had my way, we might be on dump terminals right now. I'm just saying, but we can't do that. In other words, you can secure things if you can lock everything down. You can't operate as a hospital entity.
Right.
Now we have things like the CARES Act, which actually is giving patients more information, freely opening things to them. A huge risk is digital transformation. People have to understand it's a first time for many people that they've actually had to get data outside of their four walls. There's a risk. Now, what we have to do is have control effectiveness to mitigate it, because that risk will always be there. And then we actually monitor it. One of the things we can't forget is monitoring that risk and monitoring the activity. That's a key thing that we have to do. Is it easy? Who was a Kennedy said, we go to the moon not because it's easy, we go to the moon because it's hard.
Right.
Well, I tell people that my business is the patient safety, security, privacy business. It's not the convenience business. So there are risks, and sometimes we have to accept some of those risks, but monitor them, because you actually have to make patient care effective, efficient, and sometimes easier on the doctors to perform it more quickly.
Yeah, that's great point.
One of the things I always say, I work closely with our privacy officer, Karen Haberkos. In fact, I think she was on one of these.
She was.
Yes. And
we love Karen.
She's
Awesome.
she's been a blessing for me, because she actually knew, as an interim, you really have to rely on the people in the organization.
Right.
I'm not going to find out everything myself. But the other thing is, I am not always going to be in agreement with the CIO. His is to make operations move. Mine is to make them safe. And Karen's is to lock us down if I failed at any of those attacks.
Right.
When you work together like that, I think you can manage risk. And I think that's the biggest thing we have to do, is how do we manage it?
That's great advice. As you think about that, what advice would you have to listeners that are trying to build relationships with those clinicians and other business leaders?
Well, one of the things too is we have a research area, and we have to be very, visible to them. I would tell everybody during COVID, we were like physically dispersed.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we were like socially distancing too. We can be physically distanced from folks, and a lot of people work remote, but we have to be socially connected. In other words, I don't email them; I call them up. I meet the main users, or the main people that I need to secure down. And it's interesting when sometimes you get research folks, and they really need to put that thumb drive in, carry that everywhere they go. And sometimes you have to ask them, how important is that research, your lifetime research? So what is the value of you losing that or retaining it? And that's where I said, that's where I come in. I partner with them on that.
Yeah, that's excellent. What are your top 3 priorities that you're currently managing at the university?
Well, one of the things that everybody is looking at is identity access management, really from a privilege access management standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
It's usually a huge risk for everybody. There's tools, there's a plethora of things to use. However, you have to understand what you're doing. In other words, you have the ability for hackers now to come in and do a credential harvest, credential fish. How are you going to stop that? Well, you need to understand, first of all, what would happen in the event of a privilege escalation and how you can see that. So those are the things we monitor, we identify, and then put processes and rules in place to literally stop things from happening. One of the key things that people don't do, and I always tell people when I come in as an interim, it's like a one-term president. I don't have to worry about being reelected.
That's right.
And so there's a lot of things I could do. So
there's power in that.
There is power in it. So I do things and ask for forgiveness later, but you have to be willing to block things that are not, they don't look right.
Mm-hmm.
You can investigate them later, re-enable people, but you better be prepared to block instantly. That stops the bleeding. It stops the risk till you can remediate it or investigate it. So that's what some of the other things we're doing is, obviously you have endpoint protection. But if you look at, everybody's like, have you had an incident? Well, we have events. Anybody that has healthcare, other industries, we're getting over 10,000 events that we block them. So you have to identify what you block. You have to keep watching them, understanding anomalous behavior, tracking that. So, one of the key things is really understanding the tools that you have to block it, reassessing your rules all the time, and then having the staff be able to respond to them quickly. I ran track at Indiana University, and our coach Sam Bell used to say, he said, I'm going to train you like others won't, so you'll react how others can't. And we have to do that with our staff too. It's still human beings running the tools. So those are some of our large priorities. And then again, some of the ancillary things, it's, there's always outside threats, hackers. You have to understand that a patient record is very, very valuable, and you have to track insider threats also.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes people are doing things they're not supposed to do that could cause problems. Sometimes it might be nefarious behavior, but innocent behavior like I'm taking my home thumb drive and going to put it in. I just happen to have a freeware version of Adobe that, has a backdoor ransomware on it. And these things happen. We block those now. And again, also there's phishing. I mean, you can, to be honest with you, you'll get down to about, if you can get under 10%, you're good. You're going to have your frequent flyers, which we always have. They'll click on anything, you send them, you retrain them, and it still doesn't work. So then you watch them. The other thing too is those usually are the first vector for an account takeover, and you have to have those controls in place to identify it. So those are the things we look at. Till they're fully remediated, we monitor.
Right.
And at that time, once they're fully remediated, we're going to monitor something else. I'm going to the next patient in a sense.
Yeah. With those frequent flyers, some organizations will tie punitive recourse. Have you thought about that, or have you done that in the past, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the top cardiologist that brings in the money that pays my check, it's usually not good to have punitive damages on those.
Right.
I like to counsel them. I contact them and counsel them. So yes.
I love that. Always pragmatic. You always have pragmatic approach to things. If you weren't in this role, what would you be doing outside of healthcare and IT? What's your passion?
See the boat right here.
I did.
My wife and I actually have bought a home up in northern Maine, and it's in New Harbor, Maine.
Oh, nice.
I hope this doesn't bring a lot of people there because it's a beautiful small town. Pemaquid Lighthouse, one is the third oldest lighthouse in the United States, I think, is at the point. And I work on a house that was built in 1780.
Nice. Now, where is it? Up by Booth Bay or
it's north of Booth Bay Harbor? It's north of Booth Bay Harbor. In fact, It's off the road to Damascotta. Like I said, I'll stop there. I don't want people coming. Yeah. It's a beautiful place to visit.
Booth Bay is beautiful. Yeah.
The weather's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
So what I do up there is I work on an old house that and you'd be surprised, they built these things really good back then.
Yeah, no, they'll last.
The walls behind
forever
are logs, and then they put clapboards on them. It was the original log cabin, and then rather than plaster, it is lime, crushed up shells, and mixed with clay, and so it's like concrete. So this will last forever. And we're the only third family that's owned it.
Really? Wow, that's incredible. I won't be seeing that on Airbnb, will I?
No.
Okay. That sounds like a nice place to visit.
To stay here, and I'm not sure. I like to know who slept in the bed. So
there you go. If you could go back in time, what would you tell your 20-year-old self?
Wow. I did give some advice to my son one time. I had two older sons, a 27-year-old, 24-year-old. I have a 4-year-old daughter. So, but before the woman was getting married, somebody asked me, what advice would you give him? I said, well, if you've got a car payment and a house payment, and you can only pay one, you pay your car payment. He said, why? I said, because you can live in your car, but you can't drive your house to work. So you mitigate those risks of needing to get somewhere. So
yeah. I like that. Okay. So that's what you tell your 20-year-old self. What's the riskiest thing you've ever done?
Well, I'll tell you, is that my wife used to be the conservator of the Asian art collection at the Met. Oh. She had no idea what I did for a living, so I brought her to a risk conference. And one of the things I will say, and it's very interesting, she speaks fluent Cantonese. And when I was discussing this with her on the plane, she says, in Cantonese, risk, and this is very good for people, you can use this in any presentation. She said, risk in Cantonese is loosely translated to crisis, but it's two symbols, danger and opportunity.
Right.
So I'm like writing another slide on the plane. Anyways, it ended up, but if you think about it, if you identify the danger first, proactive risk management, right? It's the only time you have the opportunity to remediate it. So anyway, I brought her there, not knowing that I needed a good opening. And my second slide was a picture of our wedding. And I said a little bit more about me. I got married last month. She's sitting right back there as her face turned red and she looked quite angry. And I said, in full disclosure, this is my second marriage. So I'll let you know if this risk management stuff works out in a personal standpoint. And that was the riskiest thing I think I ever did. So
I love that. And I love the Cantonese, the opportunity and danger, because if you don't take risk, obviously you miss out a lot of opportunities. So,
and life is risk.
Life is risk.
I mean, everything we do is risk. It's just how you identify it. There's a lot of people in our business that they wait for an auditor to tell them the risk findings.
Right.
I'll be honest with you, they're going to be the same ones that they find everywhere else. So they're not uncovering anything really special.
Yeah.
You can only find those risks when you work there.
Yeah.
You work with somebody, you interact with people. Again, I'll be honest with you, I've done a presentation with my old privacy officer, Leslie Giglio. Sorry, she's probably, so maybe she'll hear this, but her and I also got along very well. And I did a co-presentation and I asked CISOs how many of them work closely or even know your privacy officer. Very few of them raised their hand.
Yes.
The thing is the risk comes to privacy after the fact, right? But they see it from a different lens than we do.
Mm-hmm.
The risk from other people come from a different view. So you really have to understand who's in your organization. I mean, I'm one like the Holiday Inn thing. I'm not a doctor. I play one on TV. I'm not a clinician, but I do work with them closely because they know the inherent risks and other things they do too.
That's right.
And the risks that are involved if I make things more encumbrous to them,
Mm-hmm.
make it harder to get into something. Make it so.
Yeah, and you're the beneficiary of that in so much as you're a patient. We're all patients, right? So we all understand the give and take as it relates to risk in healthcare.
Those are some of the things we have to really, you have to look for the risks. And now I'll be honest with you, I do bounce around to different hospitals. Like I said, mainly. There's a couple of reasons why people out there look for a CISO. Someone retired, maybe they let them go, or unfortunately they just didn't have one, or someone who was doing a dual role, which is very hard to do these days.
Yes,
that dual role. So what I get to see is a lot of different scenarios. Unfortunately, I'm seeing the same risks over and over. So I'm trying to evangelize, and maybe through podcasts like this, there's things that we should do as a group. Some hospital systems, some people in other areas of healthcare, life science, think that this is secret sauce for it. It's the same for all of us. And if we do this all together as a consortium, we're going to know how these risks get remediated, right? And I think that's kind of what I'm trying to do in my second act here of my life play. My second act is to kind of get this out and say, you guys aren't unlike everybody else. And This is what's been successful. And let me help you walk through it.
And how are you representing that? In a book or writing a book?
I've written some articles. I teach a privacy and security lecture every now and then through Columbia University. But a lot of what I do is actually go into the health systems themselves.
Nice. A couple last questions. Hardest lesson in your career?
Wow, hardest lesson in my career. I don't think there's hardest. It was one best learned is the fact that in order to stay in this game as long as I have, you have to always be relevant. Mm-hmm. That's a huge lesson because you don't understand it until you fell behind.
Yeah.
Right? And then you realize that, I keep telling everybody tomorrow is when you start learning what you should have learned today. Right. And it's constant. One of the things I do tell when I do the people part of what I do, I say, I will help even through automation, maybe cut down the hours and the time that you work. And in that next free time, you best start studying for the next attack.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah. Work that top of license for sure. Movies or music? If you're on a desert island, you could bring 5. What would they be? Or 3 or 2?
Oh, wow. Movies, definitely, the natural. I mean, I'm a big Robert Redford fan because The Sting is pretty good.
Yeah.
Movies, I'd probably music, maybe hope that Eric Clapton was sitting there with me,
Nice.
And Kloffer. So yeah. And then one more, I'm going to have to say this, the movie of my wedding, my wife's going to watch this. So.
She's been mentioned twice. Yeah. So I hope she does watch it. So you brought up the natural. Are you a Mets or a Yankees fan?
I used to live in Boston. I'm the only guy that's, yeah.
You're a Red Sox fan.
Yes. In fact, a good friend of mine,
awesome.
Martin, is a very big Yankees fan. Another one is mine is a Mets fan. And I sit right between them and let them argue.
I grew up in Connecticut, which is sort of the halfway point between the Bronx and Fenway, and so I'm a Red Sox fan.
I live in the greater New York City area.
You did, yeah.
And so even though I'm up in Maine now, but so yeah, I go to both.
Oh, very nice. Yeah.
I'd say I go to whoever gives me the free tickets.
There you go. Well, maybe we'll have to catch a Red Sox game one of these days. That would be fun.
It is one of the last old school ballparks.
Yes, it's special. There's no question. Yep. Hopefully it stays that way. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say nothing like seeing somebody hit one off the green monster.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and they look like they're clawing their way back to a wild card.
I lived in Watertown after college.
Oh, you did? Oh.
It was a lot different than it is today. Trust me.
Did you go to the New York Diner? Do you remember the New York Diner?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And now those same apartments are like $5,000 a month or something, and it still looks the same.
Yeah. Yeah. Where did you go to school? Did you go to school in Boston? Or?
I went to Indiana University.
Indiana.
I went there to work there after. And I was from Portland, Maine. So
got it.
Portland, Maine's like a mini Boston.
It is. It is. Yeah, very similar. Last question. What advice would you give to kids coming out of school that would like to pursue a profession in cyber, IT, healthcare, et cetera?
One of the things is there are some schools that have cyber schooling, right? Mm-hmm. But we all know the CISSP, you take it, you pass it, and to get it, you have to have some referenceable background. So, look for some internships. But also, if you're going to go into the cyber world, you can't really do it unless you understand the infrastructure, architecture, networking side. Those are the pieces that we try to secure. So if you go that route, and then you kind of can move into the cyber world, you actually know what we're protecting. You understand a little bit about it, and you can get that referenceable requirements that you need to finish those, to get those certifications. It's almost like, people that come out of school and they're going to be a consultant, but you got to know something in order to consult about something.
Right.
So in order to be able to secure things, you have to know something about that.
Right.
So, that would be the best advice I would give to somebody coming out. It's almost like that becomes your internship or your, almost like your pre-work requisite for cybersecurity.
I love it. Well, Tim, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you very much.
This is Ed Gaudet from the Risk Never Sleeps podcast. And if you're on the front lines protecting patient safety and delivering patient care, remember to stay vigilant because risk never sleeps.